Hello everyone, this is Bob and Threadbare, and welcome back to LA Noire. That is a lot of paper swans.
House fire. Bad one. At least 4 Vicks. Get out there and find out what you can. The address is 650 North Hobart.
That's him. That's the cop. Tried to poke me in the nose.
I want to make homicide. You know you've made me hit that desk.
You think those Vice boys get any on the side?
My wife is so
The bum took a swipe at me. Put him down with my sap.
Does say concentrate on the card.
Police station was awfully full of dialogue today. That's one way to open the case.
You hear about Rancho Escondido?
Are we having a conversation or anything?
Okay, fuck it. Forget it.
I'm teasing you, Hersh. Tell me about it.
The new housing development is a couple of weeks from completion. Burnt to the ground last night. You guys are ready to move in this weekend. Developer's gonna have some very angry customers.
Any available unit, meet the officer.
Shit,
211 just occurred.
Garrison
At
desk.
253 Main Street. Units to handle code 2 identified.
He's still in custody, Hersh.
Wanna bet? Fella kicked him loose already. Can't hold him for misdemeanor cigarettes and matches. Right up ahead.
The guy they're talking about was the one that Cole caught with the foot chase. Oh, and by the way, we've been rooting around in corpses for a long time now, but we're about to see some serious shit in this case, so brace yourself, because it's gonna get disturbing.
You guys better see this. I hope you have strong stomachs.
Do you have a name?
Morelli, Mike, we recovered a picture of the family.
Okay. Anything else?
Be honest, I just got here, Phelps. Best you talk to Lynch. He's the expert.
Doesn't make any sense. Why aren't they scattered around like the rest of the debris?
I think they've been moved.
Ooh.
I think someone moved them after the explosion and before the fire.
Can you explain that, please?
I'm almost positive the cause of death is asphyxiation due to gas inhalation. Look at the parts of their bodies that aren't scorched. The coloring around the fingertips is typical.
They wouldn't have felt a thing.
I think the fire damage is post-mortem. I think someone moved him into this room after the explosion.
It still doesn't make any sense. Why would you run into a burning building?
What part of their body isn't scorched? Jesus.
What are they doing?
Prayer effect is from the fire. Muscles and tendons contract.
At least the house is more intact than the last two were.
You ever think about how many people have died in this world? And how big heaven would have to be to accommodate them bigs?
No, I have not. Show some respect.
Not sure that's disrespectful.
It's our boy. I think he watches the fires. I think the Sawyer fire went wrong.
So what about the guy we have in jail, Phelps?
You got the wrong guy.
It doesn't explain why he ran into a burning building. What would make anyone do that?
Guilt.
For the fire?
For his mistake. This guy wants to burn houses, not families. He expects the houses to be empty. He was trying to redeem himself. He probably thought they'd be happier together.
You are one very disturbed individual, Phelps. I know you had it rough lately, but you should start to compartmentalize your thoughts.
You could be right. Can you come up with an alternative explanation?
I'm sure it's the same guy.
Are you telling me that some son of a bitch murdered these people, the whole family, and arranged them here like Cupid dolls?
Might fit, Cole, but I don't think we could ever prove it. There's very little evidence.
Evidence?
Albert, check out the hot water system. Make sure we're dealing with the same MO.
Sure, Phelps. I'll get back to you.
Leave the rest to us, Cole. You better find out what's eating Biggs.
Alright, but before that, I think I'll take a quick tour around the house here. You know, like I said in the last case, they put a remarkable amount of effort into the detail of these burned houses. Like, it's usually not what you see. Like, normally the effort starts to fade away as you get towards the end of a game. It usually doesn't just sort of kick up in overtime like this. This is a nice reflection effect on the water here. Why is there water? Well, because one of the pipe bursts when the wall exploded.
This is the flashpoint. The heater detonated with enough force to expose the foundations.
Water heaters can do that. Oh, looks like they've got central heating in here. And that's a hammer. Yeah, look at all these pipes going everywhere. Can't open the door. I wonder if that bicycle was inside or outside when the explosion happened. Yeah, look at all this stuff they've got in the basement here. You might never come down here. It's not required. Like, you can look at that explosion from the outside. All the burned walls. All the rooms. It's probably one of the kids, at least. Looks like this was probably the mother and father. And although if that's the case, I kind of have to wonder what's up in what they've got upstairs.
So something finally got to you.
You want my help, pretty boy? You got it. You keep riding me and you won't be pretty much longer.
We can get this guy, Herschel.
You think you've seen everything, Phelps? I was with the 2nd Marines at Bella Wood. The things that went on in that farmhouse. My own guys on fire, screaming for a way out. You're not gonna get this guy. There's gonna be no photos and no citations. We're gonna kill this miserable fuck. End of story. You getting this?
You remember the list from the travel agent?
Sure.
The Morellis were winners too. Their name was on that list.
Christ. We should take a look around, work the neighbors, see what they know. I'll go across the street.
Okay, I'll try this side.
I haven't done this for years.
Officer, please.
You don't look like a fireman, son.
Alright, well, there's our witness, and damn, look at the damage that the fire did to the neighboring house here. Some nice details from the explosion, probably.
LAPD, can you tell me anything about the fire next door?
Terrible luck. Imagine after having won that weekend away.
What's your name, sir?
Foreman. Dudley Foreman.
Did you see or hear anything that might have...
Look, we were asleep when we heard the explosion.
Looks like Coach from that one old sitcom.
You didn't like Morelli, did you?
Some neighbors you get along with, some you don't. Guess they should have sold up.
What do you mean?
They're knocking down all these old houses and building a new subdivision for GIs. Morelli was being difficult.
Doesn't that sound familiar?
You said someone is knocking these houses down?
Elysian Fields. You must know them. They're billboards. That Monroe character beaming down at you. We've had an offer for the house.
Did the Morellis want to sell?
I don't know.
Really?
Whatever you thought of Morelli, his whole family is dead. They couldn't have all deserved that. I want you to help me here, Foreman.
Morelli was pig-headed. He built the house himself. He didn't want to sell. Stubborn fool was ruining it for all of us.
You said the Morellis had won a weekend away to Catalina Island?
Yeah, that's right. First thing I thought after the explosion was, thank goodness they was away. But then I find out they was still in there.
Who was running the competition?
What? I don't know.
I think you know plenty about the competition, Mr. Foreman. I think Morelli was holding out, and that was threatening all the other sales that were taking place around here.
That may or may not be true. You can speculate all you like, but you have no way of proving what you just said.
Well, yeah, that is what was happening, but...
You're off the hook, for now. You didn't enter yourself?
I'd already agreed to sell. The competition was an incentive for those who were still thinking about it.
So, it was specifically targeted at the holdouts. And then some of them just won when the Suburban Redevelopment Fund said so. Another doghouse. Oh, here's the heater.
Looks like the same model.
Oh, it looks like the same person was servicing it, too. Varley. I believe that was the guy in the Suburban Redevelopment Fund's pocket. But he was essentially offering incentives, bribe. He wasn't the one setting the fires. Speaking of which...
How did you get my number, Ira? At first I didn't understand you. But now I do. I'd like you to come back to the clinic. I'm helping other people now, Doctor.
I think you are confused. You haven't been to the clinic for weeks.
I'm not confused anymore, Doctor. I'm helping people be together.
This world is only temporary. We'll all be happier in heaven.
Why don't you tell me where you are and I can come to you? I think the fires should end now. They have served their purpose. Oh, the fires are only beginning, Doctor. After the fires, everything will be beautiful and clean.
Everything will be erased. The world will be fresh and new.
I can see my purpose now, Doctor. And you helped me to find it.
Now that, I think, was a meanwhile. Music's still going, though, so there's obviously something around here. Unfortunately, I just could not find it, and so... it's in this guy's front lawn. Man, I always miss this one. Come on.
Someone was keeping watch. Looks like they were here for quite a while. Brand looks distinctive.
Calderon. Yep, 4 cigarettes worth.
Whoever he was wearing boondockers. I would know that imprint anywhere.
I believe that's an army boot he's talking about. Yeah, someone was creeping around here watching the fire. So let's ask about it.
Did you see anyone hanging around the Morellis' home prior to the explosion?
Nope. Can't say as I was looking out, though.
I think you're covering for someone, Foreman. Who is it?
And I think you are off your rocker. How can you make an accusation like that? What proof have you got?
Nothing personal. I'm just doing my job. You understand that? You sure, Mr. Foreman? There are signs of someone hanging around over there by the fence.
Hey, now that you come to think of it, there was a guy. Kind of tall. Skinny, though.
Anything else?
Orange lumber jacket, a beat-up hat, and no hair. I thought he was the pest exterminator guy who was working around here the last few days. But that guy had hair.
Thanks for your time, Mr. Foreman.
Sure. Hey, if you're interested, I have one of those competition flyers in the kitchen. I could get it for you if you like.
That would be great.
Any luck, Cole?
A couple of things. What did you pick up?
Folded piece of paper. Looks complicated.
Japanese call it origami. Can I take a look?
Sure.
Paper crane. There's a legend about them. You fold 1,000 of these and you get a wish.
Now, what's origami doing in 1947?
Hey, don't break it.
I'm not. I'm unfolding it. It looks like a waybill or a flyer.
For what?
For Elysian Fields developments.
Oh, I see you already have one.
There's the missing piece.
When did the flyer arrive in your mailbox?
They've been arriving for weeks. This one was in the mailbox when I got home from work yesterday afternoon.
How do you fill it out, though? Alright, looks like the game was lit up.
About $5 for these loose. These cops, it's got to be something big, right?
I need an address for a property developer. Elysian Fields Developments.
One moment, Detective. The address is 748 North Oxford Avenue, Wilshire. Anything else?
Messages, please.
You have a message. Contact Captain McKelty immediately.
Thanks. Can you put me through, operator?
Of course. Here you are.
Commander?
Leads in the Morelli fire.
We're about to go and visit Elysian Fields Developments.
You're about to do what? Leland Monroe? He's a personal friend of the mayor and the chief. Are you out of your mind? I'm warning you, Phelps.
Commander, we have a line of inquiry.
You have something, you bring it to me. You're hanging by a thread, Phelps. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
Good. Have a report on my desk today.
Why is the word abbreviation?
Kelty has warned us off over Elysian.
Makes sense. It's a dead end. We should check out Rancho Escondido.
You know the place?
Sure. Corner of Fountain and Wilton. Let's go.
Kind of weird to hear crowd murmuring coming from like 4 guys. Anyway, we're actually going to be following Herschel's lead first.
Can you drive to this one?
So we're going to make him drive.
Now, national news.
You know, there are times when you really miss a nightstick. There's more religion in the end of a nightstick than in 100 cathedrals.
Not sure how that makes sense, but it is very noir.
I'm not gonna tell you again, sir.
Don't tell me when and how I can come and go on my own property.
It is not
This is
safe,
America,
sir.
dickhead.
Now step back, or I'll lock you up for a
Smart
fray.
mouth son of a bitch.
You sorry sack.
Oh, hey.
That's done it. We're gonna have to pacify it.
Guess we're boxing now. Punching out a bunch of unhappy veterans. Veterans who are terrible boxers.
Good thing you showed up when you did, detectives. Those folks were baying for blood.
Okay, then. Let's see if there's anything left to take a look at.
Not much. Are they gonna blame this one on an act of God? All the houses burned down like that?
Mortar is like dust. Is that normal in a fire?
You'd expect some shrinkage in the heat, but it looks like the cement barely adhered to the brick. Doesn't appear to be any wall ties either. This thing looks like it was built on the cheap.
Well, there's built on the cheap, and then there's built to fail.
If we're paying a visit to Elysian and ruining my career, let's bite the bullet and get on with it.
What about over here? Looks like there's some words printed on the wood. Keystone Films. Film lumber. Not for construction use. You would think Cole would have a look at that. You would think that would, you know, be an important clue. Especially with it on all the wood around here. All these big old stacks of wood just sitting out in the open. Think any one of these police officers would just sort of ramble on up, see that printed on the wood. You've got nothing to say. And, you know, make a note of it. Send it in to the office. Tell the detectives who are on the case that, you know, this wood is not meant for construction use, and it says so on the wood. Yeah, I know I'm harping on it, but
You know the way. You can drive.
at the very least, it will be explained in the next real case after this one. It's just weird that it's not explained now, that's all I'm saying.
America is a lucky country, and California is
Detectives Phelps and Biggs, LAPD, to see Leland Monroe.
Do you have an appointment?
We're the police, lady. We don't need an appointment.
Can I tell him what it's about?
It's an official investigation.
There are 2 police officers here to see Mr. Monroe. Send them through.
And that's our cue. Thanks, ma'am.
This is feeling an awful lot like that one case with the cannery.
May I help you, gentlemen?
We would like to speak to Mr. Monroe.
I'm afraid it's impossible. Mr. Monroe's schedule is booked weeks in advance.
Cut to the chase, sister. Is he in?
I'm not at liberty to reveal that, officer.
So he hired you for your intelligence?
I find that offensive.
You have every right to.
This is getting us nowhere, miss.
Casino.
Would you like us to return with a warrant?
That won't be necessary, gentlemen. Come into my office.
See, now that guy's wearing suspenders without a belt.
You like a cigar? Drink, boys.
Sure, I'll have a scotch.
Biggs!
Not while you're on duty, Biggs. Sure has got a lot of models around here. I guess this is his office and his display room. Strange that he would have a map of the new freeway development, too, though. Seems a bit odd to add into a bunch of housing stuff.
We're investigating a series of domestic fires, Mr. Monroe.
It's terrible, boys. How can I help?
Elysian Fields and Suburban Redevelopment Fund flyers keep turning up in the vicinity of the fires.
They're turning up all over town, boys. Can you imagine the current demand for housing?
So that's your explanation, Mr. Monroe? Coincidence?
Explanation? Why, what's to explain? I advertise on radio and billboards for buyers, and I advertise for sellers using waybills.
We hear that Suburban is under severe time pressure to complete work on the new houses. I think you're getting heavy-handed about it, and it's gone wrong.
I hope you have some proof of how I'm involved in this. I'll be happy to sue you for whatever you're worth.
Sorry. My mistake. We found a family burnt out in their home. Another house burned to the ground. Another Elysian Fields flyer. Our information is that they didn't want to sell.
Are you saying that's something to do with me? Is that your point?
Point is, every time we find a family barbecued, we find one of your flyers. Is that good advertising?
What do you know about a competition for families to win free vacations to Catalina Island?
My company runs many promotions. I'm not familiar with that one.
Level with me, Mr. Monroe. You know all about the vacation offers.
You can believe whatever you like, son. You're missing the vital ingredient called proof.
Now this one we can actually nail him on.
Your face is all over the flyers, Mr. Monroe. You know about the prizes, and you're aware that they get given to holdouts.
My face is the brand. It's on all our advertising. Did you know that the mayor and the chief of police are part of the Suburban Redevelopment Fund? You want to accuse them of murder as well?
You've made offers to buy houses in areas where fires have been recorded.
Are you suggesting that I'm burning people out of their homes so that I can sell them new ones?
What happens to your plans if a family like the Morellis refuses to sell?
We work around them. Business finds a way. That's the American way.
I think you're being less than candid, Mr. Monroe. You're building these homes to some timetable. You're under pressure to get rid of the holdouts.
And how exactly do you think you can prove that in a court of law, detective?
You don't ask, you never find out. Come on, Mr. Monroe. You expect me to believe that you would build a new development with one of those old piles smack bang in the center of it?
Progress is an inexorable process, detective. Those who choose to stand in defiance are usually confined to the wastebasket of history. To answer your question, yes, we would build around them if we had to. Most people see sense.
What's Elysian Fields' involvement in Rancho Escondido?
One of our latest housing developments. It was due to open on the weekend, or was before the unfortunate conflagration.
It met with building code regulations.
Absolutely. Only the best for our returning heroes.
Is that so?
You're lying, Monroe. There's something out of kilter about that development.
Son, I've had enough of you and your fidgety friend. There's no way in hell you can prove that my materials were inferior.
And this is why you go to Rancho Escondido first.
I'm no expert, but I think we'll find that the bricks being used on those houses are undersized and the mortar is faulty.
And there's no wall ties connecting the masonry to the frame.
Every building is built to a budget, boys. Those buildings were inspected and fully insured by California Fire and Life. Investment of that magnitude demands it. Do you think that they'd vouch for the buildings without examining them? The arsonists, do you have any suspects?
We aren't at liberty to say.
I didn't think so. The contractors I use for waybills, do you suppose it could be any of them? I have a list of their names if it'd be of any help.
That would be very helpful, Mr. Monroe.
Glad to hear it. I'm always happy to help the LAPD. My secretary will provide you with that list. Did you know that I'm on the board of the police pension fund?
So I guess that means the insurance company's in on this too.
Glad to be of help, officers.
What's the story? Any of these names ring a bell?
There is one.
Herbert Chapman is on this list.
Find the phone. We need to know where we're at with Chapman.
I think he's a bit of a gangster.
Your boss is a fine man.
Oh. So this is where the rest of the building was.
If you're a producer, then I'm Lana Turner, Jack.
You know, this is what they had before cubicles.
Operator, give me R&I.
It's not about getting, it's about giving.
Putting you through now.
Phelps, badge 1247.
How could I help, Detective?
Can you check whether we are still holding a Herbert Chapman?
Let me find out for you. He was released this morning, Detective. I'm sorry, Detective.
It's not your fault. Can you give me a last known address and put out an APB on the guy?
I'll get back to you, Detective. APB will go out over KGPL shortly.
Thank you.
So yeah, as much crap as cubicles are, at least they keep you from seeing everybody around you.
I love the chase till the minute I win it. A beautiful face delivers love for me in it. Give me your heart and baby I'll bin it. 'Cause I always kill the things I love.
Buy me a drink, Cole? No! Not even for old time's sake? Not even for that. You're not gonna ask me why I'm here? I wouldn't give you the pleasure. We'll get around to it. She's in fine voice this evening. I wonder how the commander would feel
Save
about...
the threats for someone who cares about them, Roy.
You're breaking my heart, Cole. You know how I feel about you. Stay away from Elysian Fields.
I should have known that you were playing errand boy.
You and your doofus partner. You have been warned.
Thanks for your cooperation, officer.
I love you.
Stay away. You have no idea the type of people that are involved in that company.
I have a pretty good idea, Roy. The same kind of people that sent you here.
Your investigation is finished. Homicide will be taking over from here. I've heard we've had a spate of grass fires in the hills that you and that hunchback might be able to handle. Thanks for the drink, Cole.
You get the message about Monroe?
Yeah, Earl delivered it. You?
McKelty. He started making noises about my pension.
Sorry about that, Herschel. I didn't mean to drag you into this.
Save it, Phelps. Monroe's an asswipe. And so was Earl. And so was McKelty when it's all said and done.
KGPL calling car 11K, 11K.
11K, go ahead.
11K, the last known address of suspect Herbert Chapman is 650 North Kingsley Drive in Wilshire.
Roger that, KGPL. 11K en route.
Let's go pick him up.
Man.
You fought at Sugarloaf, didn't you?
I did. But I don't like to talk about it.
You come across a guy called Jack Kelso out that way?
You know Jack Kelso?
He's an insurance investigator over at California Fire and Life. Our paths cross from time to time. For some reason, seeing you makes me think of him.
Has Jack spoken to you about his experiences on Sugarloaf? Or the rest of the campaign?
Jack keeps stum just like you do. I know what it feels like to get back from conflict. You gotta respect that. Hang a right.
We're looking for Herbert Chapman.
I'm looking for him too. I need him to move his car so I can mow the lawn.
He's definitely not here.
I've been banging on his door off and on for a couple of hours. Yeah, he's out somewhere. There's some
Let's
kind of
take
problem.
a look at the car.
see what he's hauling around.
Hey, fun note about these mosquito coils.
Motive, opportunity, and hard evidence.
Apparently they're a lot more common in Australia, where the game was made, than in America, where it takes place. Especially in 1947. That's why they look so weird to me.
Definitely gives him opportunity.
I think that would be more like motive. Especially since that's his job, apparently. Oh dear.
We should revise the APB. He's clearly armed.
Hold it, Cole. There he is. It's Chapman. He's coming out of the laundromat. Shit! He's seen us.
Cops! Again!
Really, dude? This is your solution?
Son of a bitch, he must have caught the trolley. We gotta move fast, Cole. I'll call this in, get some cars dispatched. Car 11K calling KGPL.
Go ahead, 11K.
11K requesting assistance. In pursuit of suspect aboard the 1110 University streetcar. Currently heading east on Melrose Avenue. Advise all units. Suspect is in control of car and driving dangerously.
Roger, 11K. All units, officers need assistance on Melrose Avenue. A suspect aboard the 1110 University streetcar headed eastbound. Approach with caution. Suspect is in control of the streetcar and driving dangerously. Units to handle code 3 identified.
Stay on his ass, Cole. Don't lose him.
I don't think that'll be hard. The only problem is how to stop him. I mean, I could try ramming him, but I don't think that would work. I mean, just by looking at what he's doing in the front there. Oh, jeez, he's cutting off the fire truck, too.
See if he can damage one of the wheels. Might act like a brake and slow the thing down.
Alright, now that we've taken the turn, Big's coming out,
I need to be closer,
shooting at the thing. Now we can stop him.
As soon as he ditches the trap, we'll be there to grab him.
Oh.
End of the line, you little prick. Come on, Cole.
Well, that was nice and quick. Oh, jeez. Didn't expect him to start firing.
Looks like we have our man, Cole. Well done.
I'm not so sure. Chapman seemed to have his own agenda. There seems to be more to this than a personal vendetta.
What are you talking about?
Fires benefit Elysian in some way. I see Chapman and Monroe working together.
You have a point. The evidence is good for Chapman. Hard to be worrying about his side of the story when he's blasting away with that big 45.
Nice work, gentlemen. Put yourself at considerable risk stopping that trolley and probably saved a lot of lives. Anyone else but you, Phelps, and you'd be up for a bravery award. We've had our eyes on that slippery son of a bitch Chapman for as long as I can remember. I couldn't be happier than to wipe him off the scoreboard. I hope this puts to bed that crazy stuff you had going about Leland Monroe. What were you thinking, Phelps? You'll be calling Richard Nixon a crook next.
Historical in-joke. Also, he gets a lot harsher at you if you screw up the interview with Leland Monroe.
What is it?
A letter from Lou. His insurance policy named me beneficiary.
California Fire and Life. You worked for Elysian?
The roof that he was working on collapsed.
It's a very generous settlement. Elsa, I'd like you to do something for me. I think there's something dirty about Elysian Fields.
What has that got to do with Lou?
I want you to reject this settlement. I want you to go and see an investigator named Jack Kelso and ask him to make some inquiries about Lou's case.
Isn't this police work?
Do you want to find out what happened to Lou?
Why would he help this Kelso?
Jack won't be able to help himself if he smells a rat.
He is a friend of yours?
He Hates my guts. Elsa, you could take this money and let them get away with it, or we could get Jack's help and do something about it.
Why not be honest with this man, Cole? He deserves your honesty if you want his help.
Believe me, Elsa, I'd like to level with him. I really would, but it's too late. Years too late.
Why is he still wearing his wedding ring? Right, anyway, if I had to guess, Chapman and others like him, they may have been hired to burn down the developments, like Rancho Escondido. So, for today's review, I'll be looking at a movie that's definitely a classic noir, but which takes a different tone from the usual gangster film. The movie's title is The Asphalt Jungle, and it was released in 1950. The story about the story. I usually don't talk about the politics of Hollywood because usually they don't matter. A good story is a good story, and stories that tell you what to think, regardless of their motivations or conclusions, aren't good stories. But this time it's worth bringing it up because in 1950, the director, John Huston, was getting very political. Following World War II, America didn't pivot towards anti-communism so much as we returned to it. The first Red Scare took place just after the Bolsheviks won in Russia, after all. And while the USSR was our ally of convenience during the war, pretty much everybody on both sides knew what would happen once the fascist threat was eliminated. In fact, HUAC, the House of Un-American Activities Committee, first came into being in 1938. Its precursors date back to 1918, and it became a permanent House committee in 1945. In July of '46, Billy Wilkerson started publishing names of supposed communists and communist sympathizers in his newspaper, The Hollywood Reporter. According to an article later published by his son, Wilkerson did this less out of patriotism or love of capitalism, and more out of revenge for his decades-old failed attempt to create his own studio. However, HUAC took his list seriously, and it called many of the people named to congressional hearings to speak about the supposed spread of communist ideas in Hollywood films. Some of the famous names that appeared before the committee were just as concerned as HUAC, names like Walt Disney, Ayn Rand, and Ronald Reagan. Others, however, protested the growing witch hunt, and this second group included Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall, Billy Wilder, and John Huston. But at the center of this controversy was the Hollywood 10, group of mostly screenwriters who were brought before Congress to answer allegations that they were members of the Communist Party and inserting communist propaganda into their films. Many of them were communists, by the way, but even at that point, being a communist wasn't a crime. The Hollywood 10 were the 10 witnesses who refused to testify at all, citing their First Amendment rights, and they were held in contempt of Congress. Following the hearings, the president of the MPAA, Eric Johnson, stated that he would see to it that the Hollywood 10 would be fired and not re-employed until they swore they weren't communists and agreed to work with HUAC. And that was the start of the Hollywood Blacklist, a list that would ruin hundreds of people's lives for the next 15 years. By the way, do you know how the blacklist ended? Two big reasons. First, TV stations started ignoring the list and broke the monopoly. Second, a man named John Henry Falk sued the blacklisters and won, which meant that they were now liable for the loss of income that comes with blacklisting. So what's all this to do with the Asphalt Jungle? Well, in the first place, HUAC protests were how John Huston met the movie's future lead actor, Sterling Hayden. During World War II, Hayden left a growing Hollywood career to join the military, and he wound up becoming an officer of the OSS, the precursor to the CIA. He infiltrated what was then fascist Yugoslavia, and he became a communist sympathizer after spending time with the local resistance fighters. He wouldn't end up on the blacklist later because he caved in to HUAC and named names, a decision he would later regard with contempt even though the names he gave were already known to the committee. John Huston, meanwhile, would move to Ireland in 1952 and spent most of the rest of his life there. But the other reason I believe the Asphalt Jungle has something to do with politics is because of the way it humanizes the criminal protagonists. In most movies about gangsters and career criminals, including all the ones I've covered in this series, the gangsters are completely amoral, with no compunctions about killing and no respect for family values or lawful businesses. But as you'll soon find out, that's not going to be the case this time. The story. The movie begins with a tall guy evading the cops, eventually ducking into a grimy brick cafe. As soon as he's inside, he hands his revolver to the man behind the counter, who hides it in his cash register without a word. The cops aren't far behind, and although they ask the restaurant owner, Gus, to cooperate, he tells them to get a search warrant or to get out. So they arrest the tall man and leave. The man is put in a police lineup, and we learn his name. William Dix Handley, age 36, born in Kentucky. It's obvious that the officer in charge, Lieutenant Dietrich, wants him for armed robbery, but for whatever reason, the man who was robbed refuses to identify Dix. Commissioner Hardy calls Lieutenant Dietrich up to his office and starts chewing him out for the record crime levels in his precinct, and for all the bookies he's let slide. Hardy wants Dietrich to get all police brutality if he has to, and he asks about Doc Erwin Riedenschneider, a career felon who recently got out on parole and then lost the police tail who were trying to follow him. In the end, the commissioner gives Dietrich one last chance to pull his weight. That evening, Doc Riedenschneider takes a cab to Cobby's place, Cobby being one of those bookies in the 4th Precinct. Cobby doesn't recognize Doc on sight, but he knows his reputation and welcomes him in. Doc has a proposition, a big caper worth $500,000. To do it, he needs a $50,000 investment. And although that's too much for Cobby, Doc's come to him because he's heard Cobby can put him in contact with a Mr. Emmerich. Excited by the payout, Cobby immediately goes to make the call. Right as he gets back, Dix comes in and makes a $2,300 bet. Cobby says his credit's good for $2,500, but Dix takes it as an insult and says he'll go out and get the $2,300 right away. We head back to the diner where Gus, who has a bit of a hunchback, is feeding a cat. Some random dude insults his cat, insults him, and refuses to buy anything, so Gus runs him out. Gus tells Dix to lay low, stop robbing places, but Dix can't afford to, especially not with his expensive new bet. Against his better judgment, Gus agrees to lend Dix the money, and he mentions that the police raided the Club Regal recently, which is where Doll works. After Dix leaves, Gus calls a man with a wife and baby sleeping in the back room, and although he refuses to lend an extra $1,300 at first because of his family, he eventually agrees. After Dix gets back home, Doll shows up with a briefcase and a fake smile. She tries to keep her cool, but then she breaks down in tears. When the Regal got raided, it was just before she was going to get paid, and she got locked out of her room in the process. She asks Dix to stay a few days, and Dix agrees. Meanwhile, Doc and Cobby have gone to discuss the caper with Emmerich at his second home. During the conversation, Emmerich mentions that he's a defense lawyer for criminals, which explains why he'd have the contacts and the money for this endeavor. Doc needs 3 things from him: money for the operation, personnel, and a way to dispose of the take. First, they need a boxman, a safecracker, and Cobby suggests Louis Civelli, an expert mechanic. Next, they need a driver, and finally, a hooligan. Paying for their services, by the way, is where that $50,000 comes in. They'll also need a fence, maybe 2 or 3, but Emmerich offers to do that bit himself. He knows some highly respectable potential buyers in the area. It's smiles and handshakes all around. Doc mentions that he plans to retire to Mexico afterwards and chase the Mexican girls all day long. Once they leave, Emmerich goes to speak to his holy shit, that's Marilyn Monroe. Seriously, her first significant role was playing Angela Finlay, Emmerich's mistress. Anyway, once she's gone to bed, Emmerich calls a man named Bob Branham and tells him to go and collect some debts. The next morning, Gus calls Dix to say he's got the money for the bet. Dahl mentions that Dix was talking in his sleep, and it gets him reminiscing about his early days back on his Kentucky farm. Unfortunately, he lost the farm after a series of troubles, and ever since, he's dreamed of one day buying it back. Dix brings the money over to Cobby's just as Doc stops by again. Doc seems mildly impressed by Dix, but Cobby dismisses it. Once he's gone, Doc talks about the talkative prostitute Cobby apparently set him up with last night. Turns out she knows that Emmerich is secretly broke, but Cobby doesn't believe it. Suddenly, Lieutenant Diedrich shows up and sees the two of them together. The lieutenant promises to stay quiet about Doc since he's not supposed to be there either, but he does tell Cobby that he'll have to raid him to keep his boss happy. Of course, this is some really bad timing, so Cobby slips Diedrich a bribe, and the lieutenant tells him to go dark for a few nights. Branham, the private detective, goes to see Emmerich and has bad news. He couldn't get any of his creditors to pay. Emmerich almost breaks down when he hears this, confirming his financial problems, and he decides to let Branham in on his scheme. He plans to rip off the other guys by taking the jewels and promising the money later, and then leaving the country in a plane. Branham says he'll tell him how to raise the capital for half the take, and when Emmerich agrees, he says Cobby can forward the cash. It's just a matter of how to approach him, to make him feel big. Back at Cobby's, Doc interviews Louis and decides he's right for the job. Incidentally, Louis is that family man who loaned the $1,300. The next step is to find a driver, and Louis says there's only one man for the job, Gus, the diner owner. Doc suggests Dix for the hooligan, and so they have their tea. Dahl has found a new place to live, and Dix gets her address as she leaves. He then gets a call to join the planning session. Once it's over, Doc brings Dix into his confidence. He doesn't trust Emmerich, and he wants Dix to have his back in case things go sour. The caper begins, and at first it goes like clockwork. Louis heads into the sewer and breaks through a weak brick wall to enter the jewelry store's basement. He lets Doc and Dix in through the back door, and together they sneak past an early infrared security beam and blow open the vault with a homemade explosive. Unfortunately, the shockwave sets off an alarm across the street, and the police start showing up and looking around. They manage to steal all the most valuable items, but as they're leaving, they knock out a night watchman and his gun goes off and hits Louis in the upper thigh. They manage to get away through the sewers, but Louis isn't looking good, and they can't bring him to the hospital. Dix and Doc head to Emmerich's place to make the exchange, but of course Emmerich tries to renege, and Doc is having none of that. When negotiations fail, Branham pulls his gun. He trades shots with Dix, and Dix wins, although he also gets winged in the side. He prepares to kill Emmerich next, but Doc stops him, saying it would be too easy. Instead, he tells Emmerich to contact the jeweler's insurance company and set up a ransom. Doc also leaves him to clean up Branham's corpse, which he does by tossing it off a bridge. Doc and Dix go to lay low at Cobby's place, and Dix pointedly refuses to have a doctor look at his wound, saying he doesn't trust them. Gus calls, saying the police have set up a dragnet, and to go to his friend Eddie Donato's neighborhood since the cops never go there. And just as soon as Gus is done, the police pick him up. Things are looking alright the next morning. The insurance people say they're willing to play ball, and when the police come to question Emmerich about Branham's body, he tells them he was with his mistress, and then calls her to tell her what story to give to the cops. When he gets back to his wife, who complains about those awful criminals he works with, Emmerich delivers a speech directly into the camera. Oh, there's nothing so different about them. After all, crime is only a left-handed form of human endeavor. Back with Dix and Doc, their host, Eddie, is getting uncomfortable with all the heat, and so they leave for Dahl's new apartment. On their way over, they get stopped by a patrol cop who recognizes Doc from his picture in the newspaper. They knock him out, but Doc gets clobbered. Meanwhile, the cab driver who delivered Doc to Cobby's place tips off the cops. As a result, Lieutenant Diedrich has to bring Cobby in. He gets a little rough with him in the process, and pretty much immediately, Cobby gives in and spills his guts. Emmerich is planning a long trip to Cuba, which is kind of funny in retrospect, but then Commissioner Hardy shows up to take him away. Emmerich reads Cobby's confession and calmly watches as the Commissioner breaks Angela's alibi statement. He then calmly goes to the next room, writes most of a suicide note before tearing it up, and then pulls a gun from the desk drawer and shoots himself. This, by the way, is the thing that the censors took exception to, since they thought it meant Emmerich was evading justice. Meanwhile, down at the county jail, Gus tries to strangle Cobby through the cell bars. Just a little while later, 3 armed officers break into what turns out to be Louis' funeral. Everything's falling apart, but Doc and Dix are still hoping they can get out of the state before the heat finds them. Doc has sewed the jewels into the lining of his coat, and Dix is planning to head back to Kentucky with the advance he got for the job. Doc gets lucky and climbs into a taxi with a fellow German immigrant for a driver, and he talks him into driving straight to Cleveland. Back at the apartment, Dix's wound is getting worse. He wants to drive straight to Kentucky, a 10-hour trip, but he's in no shape to do it. Dahl insists on driving for him. After a few objections, he relents. Doc and the taxi driver stop at a diner at the edge of town. Doc winds up spending a little extra time there so he can watch a young lady dance to some music. This turns out to be just long enough for some police officers to spot him through the window. And when they check Doc out, they notice the rocks in his coat. He even calls attention to the irony of the timing when they take him away. Somewhere out in the country, Dix faints from blood loss during a train stop, and Dahl takes him to the nearest doctor. The doctor starts him on a plasma transfusion, but he also calls the police when he notices the gunshot wound. The transfusion is enough to revive Dix, and so he immediately pulls out the IV, staggers back to the car with Dahl trailing him, and drives off. We get a short interlude with the Commissioner that's basically there to make up for the crooked cop character, but at the same time, his hard-on-crime attitude is undercut when he talks about Dix being a hardened killer without any human feelings or mercy. Specifically, he's undercut when we go back to Dix and Dahl driving through a Kentucky morning, and Dix is going on a delusional rant about the horses he had on his old farm. He manages to reach the property, and halfway to the farmhouse, he collapses for the last time. And that's the end. The analysis. So, why do people watch tragedies? I bring this up now because, while we've had sad and bittersweet endings before, The Asphalt Jungle is easily the most classically tragic film I've covered. And what's more, I feel like this would have been a tragedy even without the production code dictating the plot. Commissioner Hardy seems like a backhanded way of insulting the hard-line war on crime attitude by showing that he's really not a better person than all the lawbreakers around him. But aside from that, the tragedy fit the story perfectly. So why do we watch them? Back when I asked that same question about the horror genre, I framed the answer in economic terms. If people didn't want to see tragedies, why would they fork over hard-earned cash to see them? But while the basis for that is easy enough to figure out for horror because we want to feel the excitement of fear, it's a bit harder to lay it out for tragedy. Hell, philosophers have debated this question for millennia. Plato couldn't really see the point of tragedy, nor the point of following unethical protagonists, which is why in The Republic, he proposed censoring the lot of them in favor of happy stories about upstanding heroes who could be role models. If that sounds familiar, it's because this same idea would go on to define international censorship throughout the first half of the 20th century. In his response to Plato's thoughts, Aristotle came up with a concept he called catharsis. To him, A tragedy calls up the dark emotions of pity, despair, and grief in order to release them safely, to allow the audience to purge these feelings so that they won't get in the way of worthier endeavors. A more modern psychological interpretation of catharsis refers to the emotional dam, the wall people sometimes place between their grief and themselves, which can sometimes break down under the right stimulus. This breakdown would be the catharsis. Another school of thought relates to Schadenfreude, that amazing German word that means joy at another person's pain. While that best applies to dark comedy and slapstick, for some folks, going to see a tragedy means going to experience the thought, "There, but for the grace of God, go I." It's not that you're laughing at a funeral, just feeling better about your life, because now it doesn't suck so much by comparison. So where's the truth? Probably in a little bit of everything. Schadenfreude and the original meaning of catharsis point out that tragic stories offer the audience a sense of perspective, the understanding that our lives could have been so much worse, and we could have struggled through them even so. It gives us the strength to fight on even in the face of losing everything. To take the psychological approach, experiencing a tragedy vicariously allows us to experience our negative emotions and to understand them. This practice with our pain and grief lets us get through our real tragedies more easily when they inevitably happen. And tragedy also lets us do what John Huston wanted to do when he chose to direct The Asphalt Jungle. It allows us to identify with people we might otherwise have dismissed or hated, and it brings us around to commiserating with them instead. Commissioner Hardy is a hard-ass from start to finish, and while he's got good points at both ends of the movie, on other points he's objectively wrong, at least from what the rest of the movie shows us. Now, The Asphalt Jungle doesn't try to ram this message down your throat. It's not as single-minded as Intolerance, and you can take a different message away. But to me, at least, the attempt at tragic empathy was clearly made. Thanks for joining me again for today's film review. I'm going to be doing a little shuffling around for the next video, and as such, I hope you'll join me next time for a period piece about Howard Hughes, English Nazis, and a comic book hero.